Today, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle. DirecTV Stream brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So stop waiting and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
Well, hello there. After an unplanned, medically enforced week off, we are back. More about that later. Back in the days when the Pirates were competitive, by which I mean exactly 100 years ago, they had a team that pitched itself into contention, but didn't hit very well. What this team lacked in potency, however, it made up for in nicknames. It had Jolly Charlie Grimm at first base, Rabbit Moranville at short, Cotton Tierney as a utility infielder, Possum Witted in the outfield corners, Scoops Carey in center field, and, getting cups of coffee, two future Hall of Famers. Moranville was a future Hall of Famer too, if you're keeping track, but in this case, young Pie Trainer and young Kai Kyler. The pitching staff also had some good names going, with the great control pitcher Babe Adams. Babe Adams is in my personal Hall of Fame. Whitey Glasner, very effective. Rookie curveballer, jug handle Johnny Morrison, who was at his best that year. And, in the bullpen, this is not a nickname, I just find it pretty, Moses J. Yellowhorse, a Native American of the Pawnee tribe. Not a great baseball team, a good one, but a great name team for sure. Now, as I said, this team didn't hit at all. Even though the lively ball had come in, no one on the roster hit more than, do you want to guess? I'll tell you, 7 home runs. Carey, a future Hall of Fame leadoff man, was the best hitter on the club at .309 with a .395 on-base percentage and a .430 slugging percentage. You'd take that today. He drew 70 walks, stole 37 bases. It was a very nice start to your offensive day, part of this complete, balanced breakfast, but the Pirates had very little to offer after that. In 1921, as you might guess, the Major League home run leaders were Babe Ruth with 59, and then there was a big drop-off to Bob Musial, his Yankees teammate, and Ken Williams of the Browns with 24 each. If the Pirates had been counted as a team, they would have finished with 37, so they would have been third. Hey, the Reds hit only 20, so they were doing a little better than the last team. They were just second to last. Fortunately, the pitching staff, bolstered by the best defense in the league, kept them in it. In addition to the aforementioned Mr. Adams, there was Wilbur Cooper of Bearsville, West Virginia, who went 22-14 with a 3.25 ERA. He led the NL in wins and in various other categories. He wasn't the most effective pitcher on the staff, just the most frequent pitcher. I mean, he was good, but Adams was better. Cooper just pitched the most often and got the most support. And about that defense, the Pirates had traded for Rabbit Moranville that January, giving them their first star shortstop since the decline of Hans Wagner about a half dozen years before. As you know, Rabbit generally didn't hit much, but in 1921 he hit .294 with a .347 on base and a .379 slugging percentage, which is not by any means a Cal Ripken season. It might not be half of a Cal Ripken offensive season, but when you combine sort of almost kind of league average-ish offensive production with well above average defense, as you know, you come out with a very positive, very valuable season, and Moranville was that. A Moranville team was going to have fun. If you look at pictures of Rabbit Moranville from during his career, he looks like a deadly serious dead ball era player. He's going to stand next to Ty Cobb and grim you to death. Not grim, Grim. He's intense. He takes no prisoners. But no, he was a goofball. Somehow that doesn't come across in the pictures, but he was the kind of guy who would dive into a fountain filled with goldfish and eat the goldfish just for a laugh. If animal cruelty is what you find funny, which I hope you don't because you're probably a serial killer. Hello to all my serial killers out there in the audience. Seek help, please. Other people are real. They feel pain. They're not just here to stimulate you. You know, kids, I'm not just happy to see you this week. I have a pocket full of Vicodin, but I haven't taken any today. So this is not me just being weird. I'm just being myself, apparently. So yes, we've gone very, very wrong, but let's get back on track. In this case, Moranville's fun was more wholesome. If you had Charlie Grimm on a team, Jolly Charlie, then you're going to have music on the team as well. If you had do people still do word clouds on their blog? If you had a Charlie Grimm word cloud, banjo would be really up there in big letters, prominently featured. Charlie joined Possum, Cotton, and Rabbit, and they formed a band. He played and sang bass. So the Pirates may not have hit, but they pitched and they fielded, and yeah, they could shimmy like their sister Kate.
I wished I could shimmy like my sister Kate. Now she shakes it like jelly on a plate. My mama wanted to know last night why all the boys treated kids so nice. Every boy in my neighborhood now knew she could shimmy and it's understood.
And because they shimmied so well, they won for a while. At the end of May, they were 29-10 and in first place by 3 games over the New York Giants. It was, all season long, a 2-team race, and much like this year's Giants and Dodgers, neither club could shake the others. The Pirates' lead grew and narrowed. For example, on July 30th, after the Giants took 3 of 4 at Pittsburgh, the two teams were tied. Then the Pirates started winning again while the Giants stumbled. So as of August 23rd, the Pirates led by 7.5 games with about a fifth of the season left to play. Now, August 23rd is not an arbitrary date. The date is significant because the day after, the Pirates went to New York to play a 5-game series against the Giants. And we won't go into the blow-by-blow of every game, but suffice it to say that the Giants swept all 5 games. I guess that's redundant. They swept. I don't have to tell you they swept all 5. There's no way to not sweep all 5. The Pirates were outscored 27-6, with the Giants hitting 4 home runs to the Pirates' not. In case you're curious, the home runs were hit by George Burns, George High Pockets Kelly, Irish Musil, and pitcher Fred Toney. When the Pirates stumbled out of town, they were still up by 2.5 games, but somehow they couldn't get back off the mat. It was as if a bubble had burst, and I don't want to give you any cliches like their confidence had been damaged or anything, but they just didn't play well from then on. The Giants went 19-9 over the rest of the season, which would have been very tough to beat regardless, but the Pirates only went 14-17. They held first place through September 5th, but the Giants passed them the next day. Later in the month, they had a 3-game set with the Giants at Forbes Field. The Giants were only up 2.5 at that point, so if the Pirates had swept, they would have gone back into first, but they dropped 2 of the 3, and it was functionally over. When the season ended, the Giants had won the pennant. I won't do that. With a record of 94-59, while the Pirates were second 4 games back with a record of 90-63. Giants manager John McGraw was asked, "How'd you do it? How'd you come back to beat the Pirates?" Now, he could have said, "I have a strong roster that hit .298 as a team and led the league in runs scored, and the Pirates just couldn't generate crooked numbers at the same rate that we could." Or he might have said, "My starting rotation wasn't as good as theirs, but note that I go to the bullpen more often than most managers, so my teams blow fewer late leads." Someday, someone will think of a word for what it is that I do, and they'll realize that my 1921 Giants led the league in saves. What does that mean, John? I don't know, but we led the league in it. He might also have said that his midseason trade with the Phillies for Irish Musil added that little bit extra to the offense that took it from being good to really good, excellent. But he didn't say any of those things. Being John McGraw, what he said was, "You can't sing your way through this league." We've all heard the expression, "It's better to be lucky than good," sometimes attributed to Yankees pitcher Lefty Gomez, and that very probably is true. To that, though, we can add this extrapolation from the little Napoleon, John McGraw. It's better to be lucky than good, but better to be good than to shimmy. So keep your eyes out for the main chance, bear down, and don't go into your dance until you're safely harbored in the infinite inning. Can I say it again? I didn't get to say it last week, so I get to say it twice this week to make up for it, right? Well, hello there, and welcome back to the show. Contrast what John McGraw said, you can't sing your way through this league, with something Casey Stengel used to say to his players if they were struggling, kind of the exact opposite, and yet Casey is often rated a disciple of John McGraw, and he was, but he also did a lot of thinking for himself. I will say in advance that what he said to his players, well, they didn't get it, but I think about it a lot, and I do get it, I believe, and it's helpful to me. If a player was in a slump, I'm sure that sometimes he would say the things we hear coaches say all the time. You're opening up your front shoulder too soon. You're trying to pull too many outside pitches. You need to set up in the box so they stop jamming you, that kind of thing. The typical advice. But more than once he told a player, just go up there and hit. Not too hard. Not too easy, just tra-la-la. He said that to Whitey Herzog, who was an outfield prospect with the Yankees when he was starting out. He never played for them because he got traded to the Washington Senators. He wasn't a half-bad player, but he was in their system from the time he was 17 until he was 24. He wrote, one time in spring training, we had the hit and run on, and Carl Erskine threw me a curve, and I struck out into a double play. I came back to the bench, and Casey said, next time, tra-la-la. I didn't know what tra-la-la meant, but next time up I hit a line drive right into a double play. When I sat down, Casey came over and said, like I told you, tra-la-la. Do you see what he meant? Here's another example. This is from 1964 when Casey was managing the Mets. On May 23rd, 1964, the Giants visited the Mets at then Young Shea Stadium for a Sunday doubleheader. And wouldn't you know it, it seems like it always happens this way, although it's unusual, really. But after the first game went the regulation 9 innings, the second game just wouldn't end. The Mets were down 6-1 going to the bottom of the 6th, but they scored twice in that inning and then added another 3 in the bottom of the 7th on a Joe Christopher home run to deep center that went just over the glove of a leaping Willie Mays, and that tied it up. It is only slightly hyperbolic to say that from then on no one could score for basically the rest of time. That led to a lot of weird and kind of cool baseball. For example, with the Giants having emptied their bench, Mays spent 3 innings playing shortstop. The Giants had a young swingman named Gaylord Perry in the bullpen, and manager Alvin Dark, who'd later be run arguing a check strike call and play the game under protest, brought Perry in for the bottom of the 13th and just left him there. And all he did, I think he was about 25, this 25-year-old, all he did was pitch a 10-inning shutout during extra innings, holding the Mets to 7 hits and 1 walk while striking out 9. Over on the Mets side, their starter had been knocked out early by the Giants, but what allowed them to stay in the game was that they got a similar pitching performance to Perry's from reliever Larry Biernath, who you might remember as the Expos pitching coach for about 7 seasons starting in the mid-1980s, or the inaugural pitching coach of the Colorado Rockies. What a thankless job. Well, he entered the game in the top of the 8th and pitched 7 scoreless innings, but they weren't all easy. And his last inning in particular was pretty dicey, and that's why I'm telling you this story. The Giants' leadoff man in the top of the 14th, Jesus Alou, lined a single to right field. Willie Mays was up next, and Biernath walked him. Now there are runners on first and second with no outs. The Giants had such a deep lineup back then that you're between Scylla and Charybdis. Bernarth passed Willie Mays, but that only brought up Orlando Cepeda. Casey Stengel, then 73 years old, managing since 1925, trudged out to the mound to talk to Bernarth, who was 22 and in his sophomore season. Bernarth figured he was about to be hooked, but Casey looks him right in the eye, and he says, "Tra-la-la," and goes back to the dugout. "Okay," Bernarth says to himself, or something to that effect. He gets the sign from catcher Chris Cannizzaro, and away they go. Cepeda tried to bunt the runners over, but he couldn't get the ball down in fair territory. Bunting just wasn't something he did. He had 4 successful sacrifices in a career that lasted 2,100 games, more than 2,100 games. The attempted bunts, though, had drawn Mets shortstop Roy McMillan in just a little. He was playing about even with the second base bag, and maybe 3 strides from it. I'm talking about 10 feet, let's say. Cepeda gives up on the bunt idea and swings away, lashing a bullet right at McMillan, who catches it out of the air for out number 1, steps on second base to catch Alou off the bag for out number 2, and throws to first before Mays can get back. Triple play, inning over. Bernarth goes back to the dugout, and I would think that if you had just helped pitch your way into a triple play, that this would not be the first thing on your mind, but what Bernarth said was, "Casey, what does tra-la-la mean?" And Casey shouts, "Triple play! Triple play!" It's just that simple. I should add, just to give you closure, that the game went 23 innings. Bernarth was relieved by another future pitching coach, Galen Cisco. It seems like everyone on that Mets team became a pitching coach. They learned a lot from adversity. And as he went in, his pitching coach, Mel Harder, said, "You'll go 2. Well, he went 9. Jim Davenport tripled with 2 outs in the top of the 23, and the Giants finally got the clutch hits they'd been missing all afternoon, scoring 2 in the inning. The Mets went in order in the bottom of the frame. The game was over. Perry got the win. Time of game, 7 hours, 23 minutes. The doubleheader itself totaled 9 hours, 52 minutes, not counting the intermission between games. Game 2, the one we've been discussing, was the longest single game in history to that point, time-wise. Point of additional trivia, just for the heck of it, the last out for the Mets in the bottom of the 23rd was made by infielder Amado Samuel, the first player ever to hail from San Pedro de Macorís. He had come up a couple of years before. I've got another story that Casey appears in just a moment. It's not about him, but he was part of it. I can't help it. The world will note that this week's episode of The Infinite Inning is somewhat shorter than usual due to there being no interview or conversation after I'm done talking to you here. It's just you and me, kid, and I'm going to tell you a few stories and then rest. I was not able to get it together, and those of you who are in the Facebook group know the reason why. There are actually 2 reasons. I was delayed multiple times. I was delayed for days on end. As you know, this was the minor part. As you know, I'm partially blind, and there are times when what's left of my eyesight doesn't work, when I have to put in some drops and be wholly blind for minutes or hours. And I'll spare you the details because a lot of people are squeamish about eyes. I have a cousin who's a doctor, and he said to me you can talk to him about diseased colons or limbs that are rotting off. He himself deals with limbs that are rotting off as part of his practice, but you can't talk to him about eyes. It's weird. If you think about it, the eye is just a sack of goo. And we're generally sacks of goo too, but the eyes specifically. As soon as I got through that, something in my back broke, and I was unable to sit here at my desk, or stand for very long, or lie down, or sleep. And that's more or less still the case. It's a little better, but I'm trying to manage it until the medics can get it nailed down. So here I am with this shorter episode. It hurts to be here a bit, but it also hurts to be everywhere. So why not talk to you? And as kind of the cherry on this Sunday, as I was struggling with this, the aforementioned eye problems recurred, so I spent some time not only being in pain, but also unable to see. Coincidentally, this is how turn of the 20th century National League president Harvey Pulliam died after shooting himself, blind and in agony. The bullet didn't quite do the job at first, but it severed the optic nerve on its way through his head, so his last hours were dark and full of pain. It's not as bad as all that with me. I'm not making light of what happened to Pulliam, which is quite tragic, but I have not been having fun. I will say who did make light of it, and I probably mentioned this before, was the hero, if you can call him that, of our first segment, John McGraw, who had been on the wrong end of many Pulliam decisions and who said, when hearing the news, I didn't think a bullet to the head could hurt him. So I elected to eschew a guest this week so I could get back on schedule, having missed last week's show to all of this drama, and have something for you. I cannot promise that I will be 100% on the ball in the near future because I don't know what that promises in terms of pain management. I will tell you this much. I really empathize with people who have chronic pain. I've had back problems for over 10 years now, and I mostly just deal with it, but largely it stays at a level where I can mostly just deal with it. I say ow and I move on, and I try not to stress myself in ways that will trigger it. It does get worse every once in a while. There have been bad days, exceptions where I've had to take a rest or take some kind of medication, but nothing like I've endured over the last couple of weeks. I may have to record future episodes on Vicodin, so if you hear me giggle out of context, that's why. You know, I actually experienced that in college. I had a great history professor, a fantastic lecturer. He always spoke from memory, and he had a incredible command of his subject, and each class was so entertaining it was more like going to a one-man play than school. But mid-semester in the the first year that I had him, he was afflicted very badly by sciatica, and until he could undergo the necessary surgery to relieve the problem, he tried to lecture on drugs, and it was a much more discursive, rambling experience than the kind of perfectly written, actually improvised lectures that he had done to that point. And he would say things like, so with the Berlin blockade, Harry Truman's response to Stalin threatened international atomic war. Nuclear Armageddon. Excuse me, is this going to be on the test? I don't mean the actual facts of it, but the way that you said it. So, as a result of all of the above, I didn't want to book any guests I might not be able to meet on common ground or any ground at all. And so, just for this moment, this is a solo program, and I appreciate your indulgence. And speaking of indulgence, we do need to take a break, and so we will. We won't take a break too hard or too easy. We'll just tra-la-la. And on the other side, I have one more story for you, and I look forward to telling it to you once we're through this little intermission.
This time it's really love, tra-la-la-la. I'm in that blue above, tra-la-la-la. She fills me full of joy, tell me, Papa, am I not a lucky boy, tra-la-la-la-la. Just listen to my heart go pitter-pat. It started from the start, I felt like that. Hum it, strum it, sing it, drum it, what a thrill I'm getting from it, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la.
Today, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle. DirecTV Stream brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So stop waiting and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
Hey, do you love a good story? Great. Then you got to check out the #Storytime podcast. Each episode brings you the craziest, creepiest, and cringiest stories from YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, and beyond.
I'm gonna die. Chad could already be dead, or either he was smart and didn't come down anyways.
So at a quick glance, when I was turning off the light, I saw this thing in my kitchen, and it was kind of peeping out over to me.
Question is, Name something that everyone knows the size of on their body.
Look, the internet is a dumpster full of stories, and I, your host, Will McFadden, dive in headfirst, sift through the flaming trash, and bring you nothing but treasures.
I was like, oh, right. That would be a really bad way to tell somebody that their brother died.
I swear this happened in slow motion. The champagne flute fell into the lap of Halle Berry, completely drenching her.
Listen to all 21 episodes of Hashtag Storytime now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This isn't just any day, it's the day. The day you welcome new people to your team, or welcome an idea that changes everything. Wherever your day takes you, Comcast Business can help. With a network that can deliver gig speeds to most businesses, Comcast Business Security Edge to help protect your connected devices, and expert support 24/7. Every day in business is a big day. Comcast Business will keep you ready for what's next. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
This is the 199th episode of The Infinite Inning, and if you've been around for a decent fraction of the run, you know that empathy is a major theme of this program, a very simple definition of which is to have compassion, but that might be both too simple and too complicated. In our times, the bar might be even higher than that. Empathy is getting your head out of your ass and accepting that other people are real. They have feelings, desires, ambitions, experience joy and pain just like you do. When Casey managed the Toledo Mud Hens of the American Association, they were functionally a New York Giants farm team. The farm system hadn't wholly happened yet, but the Mud Hens and the Giants had a first-look arrangement. The Giants would send players they wanted worked on or just needed to stash somewhere down to Toledo, and Toledo would try to sell players that seemed useful to the Giants upward. It's worth remembering that in those days, we're talking about the mid-1920s through the early 1930s, the mission of a minor league team was very different. Yes, they were, as I just said, trying to sell players upwards. That was part of how they made money. But they also traded for them a lot because they were trying to improve their clubs. In the days before mass media allowed this vast 3.8 million square mile nation to share in one pennant race, the goal of Toledo or Newark or Portland was to win the American Association or International League or Pacific Coast League pennant for their local fans. And that was true all the way down to the Cotton States League and the 3I League and any other circuit you can mention. In 1930, you couldn't just snap on a radio or a TV and catch the Yankees game. Radio was blacked out, and TV was still in the lab, quite literally. You had to take your baseball where you could find it, and if you didn't live in or fairly close to just 10 cities, none of them west of the Mississippi River, you couldn't follow Joltin' Joe DiMaggio the way all of us can follow Fernando Tatis Jr. now, just to name one example, whether we live in San Diego or not. It was for that reason that when the 1927 Mud Hens went 101-67, winning the American Association pennant, that they had a roster composed primarily of Major League veterans, because again, the main goal was not necessarily player development, but winning. And that roster included pitchers such as Bullet Joe Bush and Jesse Barnes, and outfielders Irish Musial, there he is again, and Bobby Veach. Have you ever looked up Veach? We haven't talked about him a lot on the show, and to be honest, I'm not sure there's a ton to say about him, but he was a left fielder, a co-outfielder of Ty Cobb's, and he could very much hit .310 for his career with nearly 150 triples. I've talked many times about players whose statistics are aesthetically pleasing, and he's one of them. He looks kind of like the store-brand version of Cobb, but that's fine because he also comes without Cobb's baggage. He was 39 when he played for the 27 Mud Hens, but he had a very typical Veach season. It looks very similar to some of his best years in the majors. He played every day, and he hit .363 with 45 doubles, 10 triples, and 12 home runs. You know when Alan Moore's The Watchmen, the evil corporation is Vite, and in Garth Ennis's The Boys, it's Vought? It really feels like Veach should be in there. Stay tuned for that story, true believers. Now, one of the few legit prospects on that Mud Hens team was a pitcher named Roy Parmalee, a name I've known for decades now but still find impossible to spell. For the record, in case someone gives you a quiz, his full name was Leroy Earl Parmalee, right-hander of Michigan, Parmelee, Parmalee. Roy was 20 in 1927, and he had great stuff. He was a big guy by the standards of the time, a husky 6'1" and about 200 pounds. He threw very hard, but without much command, and that would be a career-long problem. In a sense, that lack of command extended to everything he did. There's a great story about him in a profile that the historian Eugene Murdoch wrote for Sabre back in 1981. Parmalee told it himself. It was my first spring training ever at Jackson, Tennessee in 1927 when I went up with Toledo. Casey Stengel, our manager, was trying to teach me how to turn and throw to first base in one motion. Well, we were playing Chattanooga later in the day, and there was a man on first. I thought I'd please Casey and pick the man off, so I turned quickly and fired. No one expected this move, and I caught everyone napping. I hit the runner in the chest and knocked him cold. The first baseman picked the ball up and tagged the guy, and the umpire called him out. Back in the dugout, Casey looked up and said, "Parmalee, you don't need to practice that play anymore. You have it down perfect." Because of his wildness, it took Parmalee forever to establish himself in the majors, really to just get a look from the majors. And once he did, he put a lot of black ink on his baseball card, but it was all the wrong kind. He pitched 5 full seasons and led the National League in hit batsmen 4 times. He wasn't a headhunter. He just had a very limited idea of where the ball was going. He also led twice in wild pitches. Murdoch talked to him, and the interview is just a litany of Parmalee's worries about whether he truly was ready to pitch in the majors, whether he was going to kill someone with an errant fastball to the head. And the people around him, people on other teams, on his own team, worried about it as well. Travis Jackson, the Giants shortstop, told a story of a game the Giants were playing against Dizzy Dean of the Cardinals. Diz was throwing an above-average number of brushback pitches that day. Finally, Diz came up to hit, and Giants catcher Gus Mancuso pointed out to the bullpen where Parmalee was warming up. Diz, Mancuso said, "If you throw at another of our guys, Terry," that is the Giants manager Bill Terry, "is going to bring in Parmalee, and we're going to start with you, and we're going to knock every one of you flat on your ass." Dizzy, Jackson said, stopped throwing at the Giants batters. Another example, in 1935, National League President Ford Frick, who was always looking for reasons not to do things, cited Parmalee as a reason not to bring night baseball to the major leagues. It was already in the minors, it was already in the Negro Leagues, not in the majors. His reason, with pitchers like Dizzy Dean, Roy Parmalee, and Van Mungo throwing at night, we may have some serious injuries to batsmen. It's funny, but it's also not something to laugh at, as we'll see. So how did Roy Parmalee get started? He was working in a factory and pitching semi-pro ball as a young man. He was doing extremely well, including, he remembered, pitching a no-hitter. He was in Lambertville, Michigan. If you look at a map, Lambertville is only 10 or 12 miles from Toledo, and so Casey sent a scout to look Parmalee over. That was another thing that minor league teams did back then. They scouted their own prospects. It worked both ways. Sometimes someone like Paul Critchell would scout you for the Yankees or Larry Sutton for the Dodgers, and they would sign you and place you on a minor league team while still holding your rights. Other times, the minor league team would scout the player directly, and then, as happened with Parmalee, do the same thing at an even lower level. Once Toledo scout filed a positive report, Parmalee was signed, then farmed out. And this happened for a couple of years, with him belonging to the Toledo Mud Hens organization, but pitching in the New York Penn League, the Eastern Shore League, and the New England League. It really wasn't very different from today's process, whereby a player might go from, say, A-ball to AA to AAA, except that it wasn't vertically integrated. These were all independent operations, and one downside to that was that a major league team could not consistently supervise the progress of a player. So if, say, a high school pitcher is drafted in June of next year, the major league team will send him to A-ball, but they will be able to say to the A-ball coach, whether they own the team outright or not, and they probably don't, but they will be able to say, hey, we want Johnny to work on his changeup. And those coaches will say, aye, aye, sir, and they will have him work on his changeup. You couldn't necessarily exert that level of control when the player was in Muncie and you didn't own Muncie. When Parmalee was with Toledo, Casey tried really hard to get John McGraw to purchase him for the Giants. Yes, Casey got a taste if the sale happened, but Parmalee really was the kind of pitcher you could dream on with the stuff that we've talked about. There's a story about Casey getting McGraw to come out to Toledo to see Parmalee pitch, and I've always enjoyed that from Casey's point of view, but I realize now I missed the bigger picture and was unfair to Parmalee. McGraw did drag out to Toledo, Parmalee pitched, and he was shelled. Casey saw his sale going up in smoke, so he went out to the mound and said to Parmalee, "Make out like your arm hurts. I want to get you out of here gracefully." The deception didn't work. "The boy's lousy," said McGraw. "A long trip for nothing." Yet McGraw did buy him that day. Casey was hoping for $50,000, but given that performance, he had to settle for $35,000. The news reports of the signings indicated McGraw didn't think much of Parmalee's pitching, but liked him enough at the plate that he might want to convert him to the outfield. That never happened. Over the next 4 years, McGraw would give Parmalee an audition in the majors, he'd fail it, and get farmed out. Give him another one, he'd fail that, and he'd get farmed out. We have pitchers like that now, too, guys whose stuff is intriguing, but even as relievers, they can't find quite enough consistency to grab solidly on to that 25th or 26th spot on the roster, depending on the year. From 1929 through 1932, Parmalee totaled 10 starts and another 24 relief appearances, and the results were as unpromising as McGraw thought they would be. He went 3-6 with a 5.14 ERA. In 112 innings, he walked 76, which was a lot, and struck out 73, which for the time was also a lot. Now, what saved Parmalee from all that yo-yoing back and forth from the minors to the majors was that at midseason 1932, McGraw resigned or was fired or some combination of both, and Bill Terry took over. And although in his own way, Terry was just as much of a hard-ass as McGraw was, possibly more so in some ways, he was also more patient. Parmalee got to pitch starting that September, and although, as we've seen, he never did conquer his wildness, he had enough quality days at that point to stick. In his 3 full seasons under Terry, he was about a league average pitcher, with a 3.63 ERA, 3.5 walks per 9, and 4.4 strikeouts per 9, which was, again, pretty good. There was one major interruption during those 3 years. In 1934, he underwent an emergency appendectomy in April and missed about 8 weeks, an injury that likely had an outsized impact on a pennant race that the Giants lost by the slimmest of margins on the last day of the season. Parmalee's strikeout rate dropped in 1935, his third and last year with the Giants, and I suspect there was something up with his arm, and Terry noticed it. He traded Roy away to the Cardinals for a glove man, second baseman Burgess Whitehead, and Parmalee just couldn't pitch after that. Over the remainder of his career, he had an ERA of about 5, and he was done in the majors as of 1939, when he was just 32. Now, I say I suspect something was wrong with his arm. I don't know that, but I do know that something was wrong with his head. Before I get to that, though, before we examine Parmalee's downfall, I want to spend one more minute celebrating his triumphs. I imagine the biggest of his career came on July 2nd, 1933. Heading into that game, the Giants were in first place, 3.5 games ahead of the Cardinals. It was a Sunday. It was the July 4th doubleheader, even though it was only July 2nd. That's just how the calendar worked out that year. And wouldn't you know, the Cardinals were in town. Game 1 was one of those historic contests of the kind I referenced in our previous show. You might recall that I was telling you about Ernie Koob, and that only a handful of pitchers, like Mr. Koob, had thrown 17 scoreless innings in a single game, and Carl Hubbell was one of them. Well, this was the day that he did it. Tex Carlton started for the Cardinals, and Hubbell, the meal ticket, started for the Giants, and the two pitchers just kept exchanging zeros. Carlton went 16 innings, allowed 8 hits, walked 7, struck out 7. At that point, he came up with a runner on base, and manager Gabby Street felt obliged to pinch hit for him. Well, Hubbell struck out the pinch hitter, catcher Bob O'Farrell, and the game went on. Street's choice of reliever was the veteran starter Pop Haynes, and he and Hubbell kept the mutual shutouts going through the 17th. Hubbell continued his through the top of the 18th, but the Giants were able to get to Haynes in the bottom of the inning with second baseman Huey Kreitz, who I hope has a great-grandson who plays baseball and his name is Jesus. Huey Kreitz walked it off with an RBI single in, as I said, the bottom of the 18th. Hubbell's line is really amazing. Even without divine intervention, he pitched 2 shutouts in one game, basically. 18 innings, only 6 hits, no runs, no walks, 12 strikeouts. And then, much as with the Mets-Giants doubleheader I described earlier in the program, except in the opposite order, they had to go play the nightcap. And this time, it was Dizzy Dean, there he is again, against Parmalee. Imagine if Parmalee had been wild. After that 18-inning marathon, people would have been dropping from exhaustion, but he wasn't. This time, the game was scoreless through 3. In the bottom of the 4th, Giants third baseman Johnny Vergès, who wasn't much of a hitter at all, touched Dean for a home run. Over the fence and everything. Parmalee made that stand up, going all the way on a 4-hit shutout. He walked none. He hit none. He struck out 13. In any era, it was a great game, and that was the kind of ability he had. He just couldn't access it on a regular or reliable basis. There's something poignant in this comment he made to Murdoch about his nickname, which was Tarzan. It was while I was with the Giants that the writer Jimmy Powers gave me the nickname Tarzan. I used to think it was because of my strength and muscles. I asked Jimmy one day how he happened to come up with it. He replied, "Every time you pitch, you seem to be out on a limb." That deflated my ego a bit. It wasn't just wildness, though, that hampered Parmalee. Sometimes a problem is physical and sometimes it lies elsewhere, and this is what I was alluding to when I talked about something being off with his head. And Powers, a columnist and editor with the New York Daily News, was gently getting at what it was, whether he knew it or not. There's a brief story about Parmalee published in the New York Herald Tribune in April 1936. This was when Parmalee was starting over with St. Louis after his trade to the Cardinals. Parmalee was talking with Herald Tribune reporter Rudd Rennie and said, "Now that I know there's nothing the matter with me, I'm a new man. My wife says it's like living with a different person." And Rennie says, "Wait, what? What did you think was the matter with you?" "I thought I had a bad heart. I never said anything to anyone about it, but sometimes when I was out there on the mound, I thought I was going to die." He'd had a traumatic experience that seems to have started this off. On July 25th, 1935, the Giants were playing the Cardinals in St. Louis. It was an extremely hot day, perhaps 95 degrees. Giants pitcher Hal Schumacher started the first game of a doubleheader, and he pitched quite well, allowing just 1 run through 6. But as he returned to the dugout after the Cardinals at bat in that inning, he fainted from heat exhaustion. Parmalee was one of those who carried Schumacher to the clubhouse, and it scared the hell out of him. "I thought he was dead. I was due to pitch the second game. I got out there. I'd been worrying about my heart. I took my pulse. It was just a faint flutter. I felt weak in the stomach." Parmalee told his manager, Bill Terry, as I said, not the most sensitive guy, that he was having these thoughts, and Terry just laughed at him, saying something like, "Schumacher's just scared you. You're fine. Now go pitch." And he did, really well. He went all the way, beating the Cardinals 13-2. But, he said, he was thinking the whole time, every minute of the game, he was about to die. Anyone who's ever had an anxiety attack will tell you that this is how it manifests. An idea gets into your head, and even if there's no real cause for it, it seems very, very real. You can feel short of breath. You can have chest pain. And the human body has some interesting gimmicks that really help you down the path of going absolutely nuts. You can override your hypothalamus, which operates the autonomic systems of your body, and really derail your own breathing, which normally happens without your thinking about it. Imagine if you did have to pay attention to that all the time. Well, you can cause that to happen, and it becomes a real nightmare. Similarly, the harder you try to breathe, the tighter your chest gets, and the more laborious it is to try to breathe. And this is the problem, that even if you are not having a true cardiac event, it feels real enough in the moment. Parmalee didn't go to the doctor right away because he had anxiety about that too. He thought he'd just get confirmed in what he already knew. His pitching tailed off hard, unsurprisingly. Over the rest of the season, his ERA was almost 6. The Giants had been in first place for most of the season, but were passed by the Cubs in late August, and Parmalee was one of the reasons that happened. Not the entire reason. The larger reason was that the Cubs won 21 straight games in September, but he played a part. He finally did go to see a heart specialist during the off-season, and that doctor assured him he was in perfect condition. But it was too late. The Giants had given up on him. He'd been traded to the Cardinals, and although there was nothing wrong with his heart, as I said, there probably was something wrong with his arm, and his career would soon be over. I started out talking about empathy. I don't know how many people sit around listing out busted prospects of the 1920s and 30s, but sometimes you will see Parmalee on lists like that, a pitcher who could throw a ball through a brick wall but somehow never quite got it all together. Those discussions always seem like an accusation, a cataloging of failure. And I guess in the purest sense, Parmalee did fail, although he pitched 206 major league games, which is approximately 206 more than most prospects get to have. And so condemning him because he didn't become a star seems kind of greedy. But beyond that, if it wasn't his body that failed him, but to some extent his mind, well, that's not so easily repaired by surgery or coaching or gritting your teeth and bearing down, no matter how often people will tell you that the opposite is true. It's very much too late. Roy Parmalee has been dead since 1981. His pitching career ended in 1939, over 80 years ago. But I just wanted to come here today and offer sympathy for Roy Parmalee. So here we are at the end of episode 199, finally. I hope to be back with my usual conversation next week, giggling out of context or not. You can follow me, just me, this week on Twitter at @GoStephenGoldman. Why Go Stephen Goldman? Because I'd really like my back to go on and heal up already. You can write us, by which I mean me as well, at infiniteinning@gmail.com. And there's a Facebook group where I'm giving medical updates now. Find pictures, links, and Shanty Hogan plushies for your bedtime needs. Just search on Infinite Inning, knock, and I'll let you on in. Maybe a Shanty Hogan loofah? That sounds like a promising bit of merchandise. Speaking of merchandise and other matters, should you wish to support the show, and please do, tell your friends as well if you can, please visit patreon.com/The Infinite Inning. Gear of a rudimentary kind, but no Shanty Hogan loofah yet. Rub that Shanty Hogan loofah all over your body and get as clean as Shanty would want you to be. That can be found, or not found, not yet, at teespring.com/stores/the-infinite-inning original soundtrack, available at casualobservermusic.bandcamp.com. And finally, should you find yourself with the proverbial moment to spare, please go to the podcatcher of your choice and rate, review, and subscribe. And if your podcatcher doesn't let you do those things, well, just tra-la-la. Our theme song, which you are hearing now and have been listening to throughout the episode, was a co-composition of myself and Dr. Rick Mooring, who says, "I believe I can sing my way through this league, and I will continue to sing my song, though no one listens but the sky above." Well, if I'm not in traction, I'll be back next week with more tales and discussion from inside the Infinite Inning.
A lot of us are looking for ways to start our day feeling more joy and appreciation. And while some of us write gratitude lists or do yoga, Others pour themselves a bowl of their favorite cereal, Honey Nut Cheerios. Because not only are Honey Nut Cheerios delicious, they can help lower cholesterol as part of a heart-healthy diet. So maybe the secret to a great mood all day is a little yoga, then writing your gratitude list over a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios. Learn more about a heart-healthy lifestyle at Cheerios.com.
It's a new day, and it's coming at you fast. With Comcast Business, you'll have what you need to take on every twist and turn, like the flexibility to control multiple Wi-Fi networks from anywhere, a cybersecurity solution to help protect all your connected devices, and the power of the nation's largest gig speed network, all supported by a dedicated team available 24/7. Every day in business is a big day. Comcast Business will keep you ready for what's next. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.